Hello and welcome to this podcast from the BBC World Service. Please let us know what you think and tell other people about us on social media. Podcasts from the BBC World Service are supported by advertising.
Okay, first things first, it's question time. What animal has jaws that can snap shut faster than a speeding bullet? Now, if you answered shark or perhaps a crocodile, I wouldn't be too surprised. I mean, these animals are notorious for their ferocious, powerful, and terrifying ability to bite really hard. But the speed at which their jaws clamp shut is nothing compared to our mystery animal. The creatures I have in mind are but a fraction of the size of those massive predators. In fact, they're so small, it's easy to miss them entirely. They're found in Central and South America and on the Galapagos Islands. They're dark brown with 6 legs and come in at just 12 millimeters long. Any ideas? Okay, here's a few more clues for you. We're talking about active hunters here, each armed with a venomous sting. In fact, they're one of the fiercest, most aggressive of all the predators of the insect world. I'm talking about trap-jaw ants. Now, if you've not heard of these little critters before, you are in for a treat. These insects have some amazing talents. In fact, they're so amazing that robot scientists have been looking to them for inspiration. But more on that in just a bit. First, let's take a look at the finer details of these tiny creatures. Over the years, many different types of trap-jaw ants have evolved across the ant family. But for this episode, I'm talking about one species in particular. Its scientific name is Odontomachus boweri. Its more commonly used name, the trap-jaw ant, comes from having mouthparts that snap shut with such speed it's earned a spot as one of the fastest moving animals on the planet. It's only rivaled by the knockout punch of the mantis shrimp. The trap-jaw ant's jaws can snap shut at a top speed of about 230 kilometers an hour, which is super fast. Or to put it another way, they can close those jaws at a speed of 64 meters a second. Like genuinely, Usain Bolt, you wouldn't stand a chance. Now, let's translate this into G-force, which is a measurement of acceleration that's commonly used to describe the extreme forces that fighter pilots experience as they pull high-speed maneuvers. The average person would pass out somewhere around 5 Gs. Trained pilots can withstand up to 9 Gs, but only for short periods of time, and after hours worth of specialist high-G training. It is possible to withstand greater forces for longer periods of time, but to achieve this, pilots need a special piece of kit called a G-suit. Now keep all of that in mind because the trap-jaw ants can move their jaws with a force of around 100,000 Gs. We're talking extreme acceleration here. Even though these ants hardly weigh a thing, the speed of their jaws gives them enough force to crack through the outer coverings and the armored exoskeletons of their insect prey. And this means that trap-jaw ants can easily decapitate a termite in a split second, certainly well before the termite even has a chance to try and fight back. They can also stun, capture, and crack open flies, spiders, beetles, butterflies, and other ants. But their jaws aren't the only weapon in the ants' arsenal. They also have a powerful sting located at the end of their abdomen, and since it's retractable, it can be used over and over again. Quaking in your boots yet? Okay, maybe not, but I think you would be if you were only 10 millimeters long and a potential victim to the fastest jaws on the planet. And you'd be wise to keep your distance, because fast jaws and a nasty stinger aren't the only fighting skills these little ninjas possess. The ants have another more surprising ability which helps them attack and evade danger. Here's how it works. When a trapjaw ant bites down with their fast-moving jaws, the force is so great that it snaps their head backwards and launches them into the air. Ants have been measured at flying as much as 8 centimeters upwards and more than 40 centimeters backwards. And when you think about it, for such a tiny insect, that is some impressive propulsion. Naturalists who've studied this behavior in detail believe that ants have developed 2 distinct types of jump. The first is known as an escape jump, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. This is activated by the ant placing its head and jaws at right angles to the ground, and then slamming its face straight down. This triggers the ant's jaws to release with a force 400 times its body weight, launching it by 10, sometimes more body lengths up in the air. It's a handy trick when it comes to escaping the probing tongue of a hungry predator like an anteater. The second type of jump has been called the bouncer jump, and often happens when the ant's nest is invaded. Trapjaw ants live in colonies made up of multiple nests. Each contain around 200 ants. These nests, instead of being in mounds of soil or underground, are built inside leaf litter, so they're vulnerable to attack. If an intruder enters, one of the ants will bang its jaws against it in the hope of bouncing it out. Because of the power of the ant's jaws, this action results in the ants themselves being launched horizontally in the other direction. This cleverly also puts some distance between the ant and the intruder. In fact, when a nest comes under attack, it's not unusual to see a whole group of ants launching themselves off in different directions at the same time, which can look a little bit like popping popcorn. Scientists believe this cooperative colony behavior is another tactic employed by the ants to confuse potential predators. Now, imagine if you could take the ability to propel yourself into the air and work as a team and combine these into a swarm of mini robots. Absolute horror for some, heaven for my inner sci-fi geek. But it is something that a team of scientists in Switzerland are already working on. Hi and hello, I'm Patrick IE, and this is Season 2 of 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter, an original podcast from the BBC World Service which explores how animals have helped us solve all kinds of human problems. This season, we've heard some fascinating animal-inspired inventions, including a robotic arm inspired by an elephant's trunk and a space telescope modelled on the eyes of a lobster. If you've enjoyed our podcast so far, please spread the word. This is the perfect podcast to share with your friends and family, so don't keep us all to yourself. Spread the love and show them how to subscribe to the series. By subscribing, it means you'll have all the episodes made available to you automatically. And of course, we really want to know what you think as well. Please send us your suggestions of other inspiring animals and creatures of the wild. On social media, we're #30animals. But for now, let's get back to our amazing ants to find out a little bit more about the inner workings of their remarkable speedy jaws. Imagine there's a worker trapjaw ant out searching for food. As it moves over and under the leaves and other debris, its giant mandibles, which are the 2 moving parts of its jaw, are fixed in an open position. The ant can hold them in this way because its contracted muscles in its head which pull against a pair of latches at the side of the mandibles to hold them apart. This turns the jaw into a spring-loaded catch mechanism full of potential energy ready to be released. Okay, let's break down how this works. An easy way to visualize it is to think of a bow and arrow. First, imagine there's no bow and you only have the arrow. You want to fire it as far as possible, but you only have your arm to launch the arrow through the air. So you throw it as hard as you can, but the result is a little disappointing. The arrow doesn't go very far. Now you've got the bow back in your hands. If you've ever held one, you'll know that it's a bendy and pliable structure. As you stretch back the bowstring, the limbs of the bow become stretched and tense. This means they're storing up a whole load of potential energy. When your trigger finger releases the arrow, all this energy is transferred into its movement as kinetic energy, sending it speeding towards your target. The result? Bullseye. Right, back to our ant. Once its large muscles have been contracted and the latches have pulled back its mandibles, the ant's jaws become like the stretched out bow, full of energy waiting to be released. When tiny trigger hairs on the inner edge of the mandibles come into contact with potential food or prey, they signal the latches to release the jaws, just like an archer releasing their arrow. The result? The jaws snap together with explosive force. This spring-loaded catch mechanism is so powerful, it not only snaps the jaws shut, it also launches the ant high into the air when it's pushed against the ground surface. So, what does all this have to do with mini robots? Well, Zhenish Bek-Jakipov and a team of scientists from the robotics lab in EPFL in Switzerland were interested in making small robots with the abilities of trapjaw ants. They're particularly keen to replicate their jumping and their teamwork. They wanted to do this because they could see the potential for mass-produced small robots that perform tasks far better than those normally reserved for more expensive, large, sophisticated robots, and at a fraction of the cost. For example, let's imagine there's been some sort of catastrophic disaster, an earthquake or even a nuclear accident. You want to find out if there are any survivors, but it's too dangerous to get in close. So you send in a robot. But what if it's also dangerous for your expensive high-tech machine? Maybe the terrain is too rough or it's too hot, or maybe your robot is just too big to go looking through the rubble. Well, the answer could be to deploy lots of cheap, easy-to-make small robots to swarm through the disaster area, each doing a different job, but working as a team. And because they're small and lightweight, they could easily reach areas that other robots just can't by slipping through small cracks. And if one of them becomes damaged in the process, it wouldn't really matter because there'd be many others to take its place. Inspired by the trapjaw ant, the team set about creating such a robot. To do this, they used an ingenious construction method. Now, you may have seen the sci-fi Terminator films about machines that look like humans sent from the future to assassinate their enemies in the past. The scary thing about some of these Terminators is that they're made out of a material that keeps returning to its original shape. No matter what you do, if you shoot or try to blow them up, they just keep coming back. Well, the team wanted to build their small robots out of a similar, flexible, smart material that could maintain its shape. To make this, they layered several different sheets of material on top of each other, each with a different function. The first layer was known as the actuator layer, and it's this that moves the robot just like a human muscle moves your arm or leg. The team used a substance called a shape memory alloy made of nickel titanium, also known as nitinol. This is a smart metal which can be programmed. Using heat or electricity, we can produce mechanical movements by returning the metal to its original memorized shape. It meant that the robots didn't need a separate, relatively bulky motor, and at only 10 grams, they were small, light, and powerful. The team also added a layer of sensors, so the robots could communicate with their teammates and work out if there were any obstacles in their surroundings. On top of this was a layer of flexible material for foldable joints, a layer of rigid electronic circuits for its body, and a layer of rechargeable batteries, which meant it could be operated remotely from a distance. So they'd crafted themselves a smart material sandwich, if you like, that was capable of powering itself without an external source and also had the ability to move and sense its environment. The team printed rectangular shapes out of the sheet and folded them like you would a piece of origami artwork into a triangular 3D object about 5 centimeters tall with 3 legs. They called these origami robots tribots. And here is where they copied the trapjaw ant. The team added one other function to their robot. At the point where the tribot's joints folded, they added an adjustable spring mechanism which would store energy in a similar way to how the trapjaw ants' open jaws store energy just before they snap shut. This meant that the Tribot was capable of all sorts of movement. Like the trapjaw ant, if it came up against an obstacle, the energy stored in its spring mechanism would trigger the Tribot to jump vertically, horizontally, or even do a somersault. The Tribot also had different ways of covering ground. If the terrain was flat, it could move in a crawl-like sliding motion. But if it was bumpy, the joints reacted by flipping the robot over from one leg to the other in a kind of flick-flack walking movement. Having this choice of how to move is really important because when you're small, like a Tribot, the bumps and obstacles around you are relatively big. The team programmed their robots with one other skill copied from the trapjaw ant: the ability to work as a team. Just as trapjaw ants start jumping together to deter predators, the scientists wanted the Tribots to team up to do things normally performed by more sophisticated robots. So they pre-programmed each robot with a different task. Some would be workers, using their power to, say, move an object, whereas others would be assigned leadership roles, using their energy to look out for obstacles. This way, as a team, they became more intelligent and were able to perform more complex tasks. The scientists see many potential uses for their swarm of small robots. One could be in space exploration. Because Tribots are relatively lightweight and small, it wouldn't cost much to place them on a rocket and send them up into space. And the fact that they can be programmed to keep their shape means that Tribots could even assemble themselves and start moving around. Pretty clever, eh? But also kind of spooky. Well, for the moment, Tribots remain a research project. Then again, who knows? In a matter of years, we might become accustomed to seeing swarms of tiny robots jumping and working together to help us solve our problems. All thanks to the jaws of the trapjaw ant. To find out more about this episode, why not head on over to our website, bbcworldservice.com/30animals. And in the next episode of 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter, we'll be hearing how the scales of the pangolin inspired an innovative and stunning new train station. In the meantime, if you have any suggestions of animals like the trapjaw ant that deserve more credit, let us know why. And don't forget to spread the word. It's #30animals. Thanks for listening.